And then I came back to the States and found that while I could tell this story, it didn't exactly pay the bills. And so I began to do trainings, began to work with NLP Comprehensive as a trainer. This is when I came back and Stephen Conneray picked me up to do strategies, because they noticed that I paid a lot of attention to the eye movements and the language and so forth. And I was on an accelerated track. I mean, I got to be a trainer fairly quickly within an organization and going, I'm trainer man. Instead of me deciding it, they said, we'll bring you along. And I'll tell you, I needed help. People used to call them up on the breaks and say, Charles made our brains hurt. So, and then Steve would have to get on the phone, Charles. But I learned something about rapport and other things over that period of time, and was offered other opportunities, which I could go on about, and I only go on about them to encourage you to take up a project. I modeled physician decision strategies at one point. That is, that how the physicians make decisions on which drugs to give you, the patient. Because there's the pharmaceutical firms, there's the journals, there's their own history, there's their golf buddies, there's all these effects, and how do they make a decision? Well, pharmaceutical firms are very interested in this, and so my business partner and I did a meta-programs modeling of what physicians do. 3 classes, by the way. We did general practitioner, cardiologist, and neurologist, 15 each. And this was all set up for us by a medical marketing firm that we were working with at that time. And this was another example of going out and practicing this stuff. See, some of you have a private practice. You close the door, you practice in private. And you can work with a client. And so you can decide that this week I'm going to practice reframing. Every client gets a reframe whether they need it or not. It's like buffing the shoes, it's like getting a haircut. And then, of course, you do whatever else they might need. And that's a practice. Some of you might have a situation where you're interacting with people on a regular basis. You could literally put a list next to your phone and go, today I'm going to ask meta-model questions. Or today I'm going to listen for the predicates. Today I'm going to write down every value word, every criteria I hear. And so you can create practices like that. But not a lot of people do. Whereas I found that to be on this project, interviewing these physicians, and we're tape recording them and writing down the stuff and then checking and transcribing, I really got meta-programs then. At least that first level, I got a basis in it. Because there was it was a project I was completing. And in fact, it was eventually applied with neurologists. But the thing that I found most disturbing, this again, you can tell you're modeling when you get results different than you expect. So Steve Andreas and I use this measure. Which representational system would you say, and we'll say general practitioner, is most important that they utilize when you go in as a patient? All right, which one do they use more often to make their decisions? Auditory, yes. And I'm going, huh? And what turned out to be the case, and I'm sure it's even more so now, because we're going back more than a decade, is that the doctors would utilize test results because the test results are verifiable later in case there's a court case. So they're much more, yeah, right. So when I'm looking for a personal physician, I look for one who actually looks at me and touches me in socially appropriate areas, unless there's permission, and does that sort of thing, and does the tests and coordinates that information, as opposed to only looks at the test results. I understand how it happened, but, kind of interesting and disturbing what you find out. And once again, going back to what this stuff, NLP and acuity, turn of the century, a doctor could walk into a nursery and could smell in the air and go, that baby has scarlet fever, get it out of here. Because they don't want contamination. It wasn't that they cared for the baby. They put the baby somewhere else. But they literally, there was that kind of a sensitivity that you would smell the patient. Actually, when I was a kid, my doctor was like that. He would tell my mother not to have us wash before we came in. He said, you wash off because the odors indicate all sorts of things about the state of health. And that knowledge seems to be slipping away. And Grinder and I are very interested on that other side. It's like, what if that was there? And supported by all the kinds of, the technology and the awarenesses come together. Yeah. So I'm doing this, that, and the other thing, and this guy calls me up and asks me about, could I apply this stuff to bond traders? And I said, well, how are they different? Do they have an extra arm? And that started a whole, well, because I got a guy called me up about this golf. He says, could this be applied to golf? And I'm going, well, do you use your neurology when you use golf? And yeah. So people have a funny idea. And by the way, this really goes to those of you that want to succeed in a practice or want to produce products or something. I'll tell you right now, as someone who did it the wrong way, is that people want stuff for them. The golfers want something that says golf on it, and the traders want something that says trader on it, and the doctors want something that says doctor on it. And here we are doing a program where we go, it slices, it dices, you can use it for 1,000 ways. And that's not exactly what people, you're very interesting and unique. And I say that because you've come here and you're making applications. And we help you with that. That's what this talk is this morning, examples, giving you ideas, and allowing you to put it together. Whereas a lot of the people you interact with, they want very specifically for themselves, for their situation. And I'll tell you, you will get your money back fastest on this training. I say this by lots and lots of people that I've counseled and coached on this. You'll get your money back fastest on this training if you take it into what you're already known to be good at. See, I was telling the short version of my story there. But what had happened is that when I moved to Chicago and I was doing this and that in the antique business, some friends of mine started doing language lessons for refugees on the weekend. It was a time when there were refugees coming to the U.S. They asked for volunteer teachers. So I volunteered to help out and do some teaching and stuff. And I got curious about the learning, the language stuff there, and why people found it difficult and how we can make it easier and how much of it was the technique and how much of it was the learner and so forth. And so then when I went into NLP, I began to play with that. And I began to take that back to those people and gave little local lectures in Chicago. Well, pretty soon I'd written a couple articles just writing up what I'd done, and then I started getting invited to these national conferences. So in that sense, I was being invited to, I was becoming the expert in this, and then was invited to do that kind of thing. Same sort of thing I find. Somebody takes this training back to a management situation. Very important one right now is engineers and managers communicating. Yeah, you think the French and the Americans are far apart. These are different languages, And so guy in this training would study with Leslie, turned it into a 4-day training, took bits and pieces of it about resourceful states, outcome questions, negotiation skills, and had a booming practice in the consulting area on the West Coast as a result. Because he was already known in that area, and suddenly he had supercharged what he'd been doing before. I know it's very attractive to think you want to be in front of a room. Keep in mind, that's kind of like, you're in school and all you ever see are teachers. So you think, well, I'll be a teacher. And there are lots and lots of possibilities out there. And like Federal Express, sometimes the fastest way to get big is to go narrow. Remember, there were a lot of people delivering packages when they said absolutely positively overnight. And they were the letter. And now, of course, they'll deliver buildings for you. So once again, it's feeling free to allow yourself to really apply this where it makes a difference to you. And my goal with you, to get curious about how you're so good at your job, how the people around you do that. So whether you find the model in one of the books or not, you can make it yours. You can do with it what you want to improve your life, the lives of others. So, how do we do that? We practice. How do we practice? By feeling free to restrict ourselves to one part of our learnings, knowing that eventually we'll get to the rest of them. It's kind of tricky. If you do stuff in general, remember, you get nothing. But if you go for the specific moment, the specific language pattern, the specific interaction, then you've got a chance of learning something, of doing something, of changing something. So where I want to start this morning is with what we call a round robin. And that's called a round robin because we didn't know what else to call it. But it's the exercise we were doing at the end of yesterday when Israel was up here and so kindly was mentioning what he wanted, his outcome, as well-formed or ill-formed as it was. And then Ken, at that time, you were the guide, and you were interacting, you were asking the outcome questions, you were asking the meta-model questions, and then you had this support staff that was each taking up a specific set of patterns. If you look at these, it's language patterns. If you look at this, it's neurological patterns, the representational patterns. Here we're talking about physiological patterns. Here we're talking patterns of congruence and incongruence. Here we're talking patterns of formulation for goals. Taking up different classes of patterns and feeling free to go, that's what I'm going after. I'm letting all the rest go, and I'm really going to work on that. And of course, by concentrating, getting that, letting go of it, and then moving on to another pattern, what you're doing is you're assimilating those patterns. So, I'm even going to suggest same groups as yesterday, although you might want to flip one person over so that the group has same numbers, and switch roles starting this morning. In other words, Ken, you're going to feel free to take up one of these other ones, and some other member of the team is going to feel free to take up the role of the guide. And of course, you're going to need an explorer, somebody who wants to find out more. The form of the exercise is that you are, as quickly and as thoroughly as possible, attempting to get a well-formed outcome from this person. That's all at this point, not a change process. Remember, communication is when two people try to figure out what the hell one of them wants. And in this case, we've got a group of you who are going to help with that. All right? We're also going to do a little more switching around here to make sure that different people get to be the guide and that you get to do different roles. Staying in the same role is not the learning. Being in a role, doing it, going to another role, that's where the learning takes place. All right, this will get us warmed up for the morning. Let's go to it. So comments, observations, reactions, microphone. We'll start that again. So comments, observations, reactions.
I thought it was just a really neat exercise to have the different people take the different areas and be able to bring it all together. It was really nice as a guide to kind of get all that extra input. Since we're just beginning and it's hard sometimes to get all of that at one time. So I found it to be a very neat exercise.
Good. And I would say that you can continue that in various ways. In my own modeling, I've had partners that I've worked with over the years. A partner that I did the meta programs modeling of physicians with, partner that I did the modeling of traders with, and more recently a partner I continue to work with who we were doing in Silicon Valley modeling organizational work. And taking Bandler's advice, what you want to do is find someone who's as different as you can possibly stand. Now, the thing is, if you actually do this, after a while, if you continue to work together, an appreciation develops. Because what does this mean if somebody's different from you? As you begin to understand this NLP stuff, what would you take from that? What's that?
New abilities.
New abilities.
Just that their map of the world is probably...
Their map of the world is very different, exactly. Their map of the world is paying attention to, as you found, some people very good at language, naturally. Some people very good at observing, naturally. Some people, you went, wow, I thought I was observing, and they're seeing really different stuff. And it opens your eyes more. And so having a partnership in a private practice or a consulting practice or in seminar training, having two presenters is often a very interesting kind of way to work because one of you can track one thing and one the other. So invite that. Now, there's also a way to do this on your own. John Grinder tells the story of when he would come into IBM, and the IBM people, somebody would brief him. And John is paying attention to the sequence of states, the incongruencies, congruencies, and so forth, and is paying all his attention to that. The person finishes with their summary. John turns and says, pretend I didn't hear a word you said, and give me briefly, what is the situation here? Well, in fact, he hadn't heard a word they'd said because he was feeling free to restrict his attention to a certain way of understanding it. And then, of course,